You may be seated. As it is our tradition, brethren, we normally take up an offertory, or an offering, I should say, during the holy days, this being the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Another offering will also be taken up on the last day outside of the Feast of Tabernacles, standing alone, a holy day, as we have come to traditionally call it, the great last day. But on today's day, this offering, I wanted to share with you some things and thoughts that have been going on in my mind anyway, for what it's worth, with regard to the things that we're faced with in this day and age in preaching the gospel. I don't think I'd get much of an argument from any of us who've been around for a while, and even those that are perhaps coming new into our midst, recognizing the responsibility, recognizing the obligation, and frankly, the accountability to what we as Christians have. And I'd like to turn your attention over here to Matthew chapter 28 for a point to be made for all of us to consider and allow to resonate in our minds and in our hearts. Jesus, as many of us know at this point in the context of the story, the gospel story of Matthew, is essentially giving his last instructions to his disciples before ascending back to heaven to be at the right hand of the Father. He says in 18 here of chapter 28, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go you therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them," and this is what we're to teach, "to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you." And this is an important element, because part of what they, that is in that early New Testament church, they were taught these traditions that you and I have grown accustomed to, have learned to embrace, and deeply appreciate. There's great value in these holy days, as I was mentioning last night, priceless value in so many areas when you really start unpacking each day for what it means, starting with Passover and ending, of course, in the great last day. Jesus' command to his church. Who's the church, by the way? Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. And therefore, because we are the church, this instruction is to all of us personally. And I want you to really identify with that connection, because Jesus, though he was talking to his disciples at that time, I think it's fair to say we are his disciples down the line and in this timeline that we live in. And so here he says, look, teach them, verse 20, to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always, even unto the end of the age, which is translated world, but that's what it means, end of the age. And it's important for us to recognize, because as I was saying last night, the truth that you know and understand is unique among Christians today. Most of the traditional Christian community today has no idea of the significance of what you and I are doing here today, and or the unfolding of the next 7 days hereafter. So it's important, I think, that we take a moment and deeply appreciate this truth that does indeed sanctify, separate. That's what that word means. Separates us from so many in this world. Notice something over here as well, and we're still in the offertory, so don't get lost here. We're just kind of building a little bit of a platform and giving you some backstory to hopefully help you to realize that we in the church, organizational banner CGI, are concerned because there are dangers on the horizon. I'll get to that here in a moment. But notice what John says. The elder under the elect lady and her children. Unto the elect lady and her children. That is, figuratively speaking, to the church of which the apostle was writing this second epistle, whom I love, and this is 2 John verse 1, in the truth. And not I only, but also all they that have known the truth. What's that all about? It's important to recognize the truth was distinctive. It was majorly distinctive from what? From Hellenism.
from the Gnostics. It was majorly distinctive from Mithraism and all of the influences of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Very important. John is mentioning this without saying it because we're not in his time. But that's why it's important for you to get the context of the historical picture and framing of what he's writing. And so he says, for the truth's sake, verse 2, which dwells in us and shall be with us forever. Grace be with you. Mercy, peace, verse 3, from God the Father and from the Lord Jesus Christos, the Anointed. He says here, the Son of the Father, in truth and love. I rejoiced greatly that I found of thy children walking in truth. Figuratively speaking, brethren, by virtue of the fact that we are here today, illustrates this figure of speech that John is using to represent we're walking in the truth. Would you not agree with that? This illustrates that you're following suit with the observations and observances that have been passed down through the ages for almost now 2,000 years since Jesus went back and ascended, of which he originally taught those 12 and others around him. We understand probably about 120 who were in that upper room at the beginning of the commencement of the church. He finishes this out right here, and I'm not going to read the whole epistle, but I'll go to verse 5. And now I beseech you, lady, not as though I wrote a new commandment unto you, but that which we had from the beginning. From the beginning we've had this, that we love one another, and this is love, that we walk, we behave. That's what that's all about. That we follow, we do what Christ was doing. We walk after his commandments. This is the commandment, that as you have heard from the beginning, he goes back and says it again, from the beginning. Why was he so passionate? Because at this time in his life, the encroachments of all of this Hellenistic influence and all of this Mithraism and all the things that were going on in the Roman Empire were indeed impacting that little New Testament embryonic church of God. And people were following and going off the rails and unfortunately becoming victimized of so much of the pagan teachings that they were all surrounded by, and of which is no different today. Even amongst the traditional Christian community, we are surrounded by pagan influences, even in what we consider to be the traditional Christian community that we see around us that claim the name of Christ. But here the apostle says that he looks at and is appreciative of those that are walking after his commandments. This is the commandment, that as you've heard from the beginning, you should walk in it. So it's important. It's important to be part of something that's bigger than all of us. It's important that we ourselves find a platform by which we can be contributors to and participants in the preaching of, the promotion of the gospel of Christ beyond our own reaches, by combining our reach with others to hopefully have a greater impact on the world, of which we have, as was pointed out in Matthew 28, a responsibility to do. So there's no question about that as individuals, and so it's important to do the best we can to plug in somewhere, brethren, to plug in somewhere, to do what we can to be part of this promotion, this propagation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. What better information do we have to give to the world than how to survive this experience alive? Wow. That means you can get out of this experience, this life, alive by virtue of, as we have been taught and understand, the blood of Jesus Christ. In the promotion of the gospel, though, as many of you know, we have been able to utilize technologies today that are just mind-boggling. I mean, if the apostles had access to some of this stuff, it would have blown their minds as to how they could have multiplied their efforts rather than running around in wagons and walking and so forth, comparably speaking. And today we have a tremendous, tremendous benefit and advantage in leveraging what is called the internet. I want to share with you just some statistics real quickly here, and I've got just a few minutes, so I'm going to kind of stay within hopefully a 10, 15-minute presentation here. But I wanted to share this with you. Last year, September 18, 2017 through September 17, 2018, 1 year, September to September, 1 year, we had 234,953, just roughly 235,000 video views on YouTube, which the average was 14.5 minutes of viewing. This is a very good watch time average for our videos, especially in a day and age when one considers the fact that most people have the concentration length of time, probably the equivalent of a couple of mosquitoes in heat, because it's a very fast-paced, fast food, fast turnover world that we live in today. Everybody wants things quickly, especially here in the West. In 2017, we had record growth for the Church of God International. Over 634,000 unique visitors. These are visitors that come and go and are kind of watching us on the internet from a distance, but nevertheless, 634,000 visits, which was representative of roughly a 76% increase over a 2-year period. We're gaining notoriety, brethren. That's both good, as you will see in a moment, because I'm going to come back to the concerns that we have, and bad. It's a double-edged sword. I'll tell you about that in a minute here. But I want to continue on here. Our page views, that is, when you go to our website, cgi.org, and you view a page, and then you click on something else, that's 2, click on something else, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5, and you stay there 14.5 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever. That's the average that you're viewing and watching and things and reading perhaps or downloading and what have you. We had, in this particular case, we had roughly 1.2 million page turns. That's a lot of page turns. That was up 38.4% from the previous year. We are currently, this year in 2018, comparably speaking, are at 497,000, but roughly a half a million unique visitors which are viewing, and that still represents about a 5.6% increase over last year's record. Our posts on Facebook, some of you probably have been familiar with our reach, our what's available of being viewed. We average roughly about 100,000 posts on Facebook. We'd like to get that up to about 150 to 200,000, but you do the math. Multiply that by 52 weeks, and you can see we're up into the multiple millions in terms of our potential viewing. And this is a tremendous, what you could say, benefit for getting the gospel out to the world, along with even webcasting right now. This whole service is being webcasted around the world. I call it the Wild Wild West, but it's the World Wide Web. But it is like the Wild Wild West in many respects. But nevertheless, we are preaching the gospel even today as we webcast these services around the world with people tuning in who knows where. They could be in the continent of Africa or up there in Alaska somewhere or in South America, you name it. People are watching from all over the world, and it's a tremendous miracle in technology that the internet does provide. However, you know it as well as I do. We are in a day and age when freedom of speech is under attack. The Church of God International, in years past, when we were on television, I remember doing a couple of programs many years back, about 7, 8 years ago, when primarily Vision in Canada nixed our programs, The Armor of God, because I mentioned the fact that God did not create Adam and Steve. He created Adam and Eve. And we got nixed on that program. They would not play it. Also, I mentioned the fact that women were created to mate with men. I remember talking to the program director. She called me. She said, "Bill, we can't play that." I said, "Why can't you play that?" She says, "Because you said women were created to mate with men." So I said, "Oh, what do you want the women to be mating with?" And she said, "Oh, Bill," because she knew me, you know. But the point of it is that censorship is now encroaching and beginning to show up on, guess what? Google, Facebook, YouTube. As a matter of fact, guess what we got nixed with here lately? One of our presenters, Tony Buchert in particular, said, Uranium-1. Russiagate. They won't play it. We're getting flagged for that. We also had one that we got flagged for pedophilia. We got flagged for saying pedophilia? And we are. And then we have to appeal, or they won't play it, or they'll erase it right off YouTube. We have been so much concerned about this, the Church of God International, that we have downloaded everything we have onto separate mainframes, memory storage little units that affords us to be able to recover everything that we have done, just in case we wake up one morning and, like some people on Facebook or YouTube, find all their products have been erased, gone, just like that, in a puff of smoke. Brethren, this is real, and we need your help in all these areas. It would be remiss of us not to make God's people aware of these things and the threats of your freedom of speech. And not only here in the States. I see Jim French here. He's here, and he knows, and he would vouch for the fact that Canada is probably a few steps ahead of the United States in terms of censorship on public presentations and venues that are used to disseminate information that are not along the progressive socialistic line of thinking, if you know what I'm saying. So the fact of it is, brethren, we are here today to provide, hopefully, revenue that will continue to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ with an edge. You see, because what is being attempted is the public venues and these forums are attempting to try to take the edge off the preaching of the gospel. We are not here to be politically correct. We are here to speak truth, because as we understand, the truth will set us free. And it's our obligation as a work of God. Do you believe that the church has an obligation to disseminate godly truth? So pray, brethren, pray that we will continue to have the courage to say what we say, to do what we do, to continue to invest the monies that we're investing. I mean, we are economically, along with other congregations like the Church of God Miami here that is co-sponsoring this feast site, doing the best we can to generate platforms to continue to preach the gospel in our areas, as many of you in your areas from your local congregations are doing the best that you can. This money that we're going to be taking up here in a minute or two is essentially all going to, that is those in the blue envelopes, and you can, those of you who do not have envelopes can raise your hand. Blue envelopes are for the Church of God International, and the other color, I think, is white, is for the Church of God Miami, being co-sponsors of this site. So if you don't have those envelopes, you can raise your hand, and we'll have the ushers get those envelopes to you. But we are going to take up an offering for the continuation of promoting the gospel, and do the best we can to use that revenue to hopefully propagate this truth that is so important in so many ways for the people of God as well as the people of the world, because it is the obligation of God's church to share this knowledge and information, not just to sit on it like the guy who sat on his talents and did nothing with it. So it is important with that. We appreciate your prayers and continued support in more ways than one, not just your money, but certainly in other areas as well, be it your contributions in your local congregations, as well as your prayers to the Almighty God, that He will continue to bless our efforts as we try to continue to keep a pace and an edge in this world that wants to take so much away from us in our freedom of speech rights. So with that, we're going to have some offertory music presented to us by Brenda Pinkerman, the wife of our elder there in Auburndale, Mr. Morgan Pinkerman, who will be giving us the main message here shortly. And she will be doing a saxophone solo, and it will be Amazing Grace. And then I'll be back up here.